Sorry that we couldn't have our official meeting tonight. I've got my PL for the Bastow course around data and literacy, which is similar to what we're doing at the moment. I just wanted to quickly record this so you can watch it in your own time and then move on with the work that's being presented to you. It is a follow-on, a continuation from what Emmanuel Scudis presented last week during the staff meeting. I want to try and keep it short and sharp, and just talk you through a few things. And how does this relate to our teaching area of health and physical education? So here we are in this meeting here. So it's a language professional learning session with the TLTLs and the learning specialists running it together. So essentially what we're trying to do here is to further build the understanding of interpreting and responding to both implied and explicit information, as we found from the results of the PAT testing that Emmanuel showed us. And also, at the end of this session, would like for you to have found some examples in your teaching and learning of both health and physical education of the implied and explicit reading and writing that's required in the CAT, SACS exams, etc. So I'm just going to open this back up. This is the ACER testing. And what I've done here is I've generated a report based on bands. Now, this is for all of our students, year 7 through to year 10. And if I was to click on year 7, it shows the breakdown of where those year 7s were. I can take them away and show the breakdown of the year 8s, etc. But as we can see, most of our students, 7 to 10, 31% of those students are actually achieving in this 130 to 139 band, which is high achieving, which is absolutely fantastic. And then we still have a huge amount, 11.44 of our students, 7 to 10, are performing in the 150 and above. Now, understanding that this is auto generated testing and also auto marked using formulas, so some discrepancy can be taken there. However, these are fantastic results. One thing that we can do is we can have a look at some descriptors within the bands to get some really specific information about what our students are doing. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but if we are to look at something like the top band or the majority of our students, we can go down to where we know our students are falling down a little bit, which is interpreting explicit and interpreting implied information, and read through these sections. One part I want to draw your attention to is just here, where it says that the students, these are the students in our top band in explicit and implied information, is that the students are able to identify a main idea from text or question when there is a great deal of distracting information. When I read that, I found this really prominent, really evident in VCE physical education. So I wanted to share with you just one example that I have found, and then I'll let you head off, either look at the learning specialist resources for other areas, or just simply, if you feel comfortable, find your own. Now, a reminder that at this current point, our understanding is that when we are referring to explicit information, it is clearly stated in the question or the data provided, and the students have to access what is already sitting in front of them, a piece of information from a graph or a table or a piece of text. When it's inferred or implied, the students have to connect what's written there to something that they already know or they make an assumption about, and then put that into the question. So I'm just going to bring up here the examiner's report. This is for the 2019 VCE physical education paper. And as you read through this, which I'm sure a lot of us already have, it talks about students being very specific in their answers, having a good sound knowledge base, understanding the explaining words, the terminology, using those terminologies, and being able to break down things like critique, explain, etc. There's not a lot of reference here in the general comments to things like explicit and implied information. So it finds it really difficult for us to be able to do. So if we take this skill on ourselves and have a look at a question like this from 2019's PE paper, in my opinion, and I'm happy to have this challenged if people feel different, I believe this is simply a flat out explicit information question where students know the answer. The word is missing. It's not implied in any way. The students have this knowledge and provide the answer in the response below. So question 12, the graph above represents oxygen consumption during and after exercise. The area indicated by the number 1 is known as, and we've all seen this graph before, we know what the number 1 refers to, and the students explicitly put that answer in there. There's no inference required, nothing like that. I would, however, draw your attention to something really interesting here before I let you head off and try and find some explicit or implied examples yourself. This is back to the examiner's report, and it caught my eye that question 3C was poorly answered by the majority of the state. 46% of students getting 0 out of 3 and only an average of 0.9. So I headed down to this question, question 3C. And I started reading it. In a study, elite level male sprint and distance runners. And before I had even read any further, my brain started to think about what has already been said to me. Elite level, male, sprint and distance runners. My brain starts to think about, okay, elite level. So this is trained versus untrained athletes. We're talking about sprint and distance runners. This might be a difference-based question, or it could be a similarities question, because quite often, obviously, sprint and distance runners train differently, their bodies are developed differently, they have different chronic adaptations take place. And then we continue on. Their blood lactate levels were assessed. Okay, blood lactate, where have I heard this before? Are we talking about acute responses, chronic adaptations, maybe an energy systems, maybe a fatigue question? Were assessed under different conditions. The runners had been training for 3 months and were in the middle of their competitive season. So is this a training program question? Because we're talking about the season and training, etc. The following data was collected. Now, I'm being presented with some explicit information here. Millimoles per litre, blood lactate levels, actual numbers. Am I going to be asked a question like, in the 400-metre run, what was the baseline blood lactate level of a sprint runner, where I explicitly answer 1.3? Or is this data implying or inferring from the data that's given above that I need to take knowledge from somewhere else? So if we go down to 3C, referencing the data, now that's telling me that I should almost be explicit in my answer. And using your understanding of anaerobic chronic adaptations, that's making the link of all those questions I had earlier. I now need to explain the differences in the sprint and distance runners' blood lactate levels. This, in my opinion, is where in VCE PE, for example, the explicit and inferred or implied information and data really challenges our students. So for me, I understand that the data being presented in ACER is 7 to 10, and I've now provided you with a VCE example, but I'm starting to gain my own understanding of how I might be able to help my students break a question down like I've just done in this video here, and really start thinking about what is explicitly told to you, but as you're reading through the explicit information, what are they inferring that you need to start thinking about to prepare yourself to answer a series of questions? We'll talk about this in another session in a future date, but as of right now, if you don't want to go and access the information from the other learning specialists, no problem. If you feel comfortable at this point, you've had a look at the data from last week and hopefully answered what those trends were in Emmanuel's work that he sent through. So I'm hopeful that at this point, you should be able to go and find a CAT or a SAC or an exam and actually have a look at some of the questions and start to trigger in your brain what in here is explicit and what in here is implied or inferred. Thanks.